We continue now at the top of Daf Pei Bezim and Bezim Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 82b. The Gemara here continues, Va'ano da'amri ka Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yochanan will say that I hold like Rabbi Yossi. In other words, that which you quoted before, that follows the position of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan hold Truma Bizman Hazeh Rabbanan. But when I made the statement that Truma Bizman Hazeh Dorais, I was following Rabbi Yossi's opinion. And Rashi over here explains, Va'ano aminu Rabbi Yossi da masnisin Rabbi Yossi ka'amar lo androgynous kohen v'chulu. It was Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah who said that if an androgynous kohen marries a woman, that woman is allowed to have truma, and it was on that statement that Rabbi Yochanan says, according to him, I was saying, af ma'achila b'chazav v'shok. Not only truma, she can even have chazav v'shok. Why? Ta truma nami Rabbi Yossi doraisa, because it happens to be Rabbi Yossi holds truma's doraisa af b'zman hazeh. That truma's doraisa even nowadays. So since Rabbi Yossi holds truma's doraisa nowadays, so there's no difference between truma and chazav v'shok. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan is saying, I was only making my statement that truma b'zman hazeh is doraisa according to Rabbi Yossi's shita. And the Gemara continues, the Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, b'Seder Olam and Seder Olam, Asher Yarshu Avosecha v'Yirishta, the Pasuk says, Yarshu Avosecha v'Yirishta, uses the word Yerusha twice, and we darshan from that Pasuk, Yerusha Rishona Ushniya Yesh Lahen. There's going to be a first Yerusha, and there's going to be a second Yerusha, Ushlishas Ein Lahen, but there's not going to be a third Yerusha. Rashi over here explains, Yerusha Rishona B'mei Yehoshua have a Yerusha. At the times of Yoshua, that was an inheritance, we inherited the land of Israel. V'chein Shniya, and also there was a second one, Divimei Ezra, the Cheshagalu Golus Rishona, when they were exiled, the first exile, and they came back. So at that first exile, Batala Kedushas Haaretz, the Kedushas Haaretz was Batala, was nullified, and therefore there was a Yerusha Shniya. However, Shalishas Ein Lahem, however, there is no Yerusha Shalishas, there's no third Yerusha, Kilomar Lo Boy Lemahadir Umir. So what it means to say is we don't need to go and re-inherit it, the Yerusha Omedasi, because the Yerusha Shniya is continuing. The Ashmin and Haikra, the Lo Batala Kedushas Haaretz, Begolus Titus. The Pasuk is teaching us that the Kedushas Haaretz is not nullified with the exile of Titus. In other words, to say, when they left the area of Eretz Yisrael after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, the kedusha did not go away. That's why we don't need a shlishis. We don't need a Yerusha shlishis. V'yomer Rabbi Yochanan said, Man Tana Seder Olam. Who is the Tana? Who is the author of Seder Olam? Rabbi Yossi. It's Rabbi Yossi. In other words, what do you see in this brisa? This brisa is saying we don't need a Yerusha shlishis because the kedusha is still there. Meaning Truma Bizman Hazeh is doraisa, and Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says that Rabbi Yossi is the author of Seder Olam, and therefore again we see that Rabbi Yossi holds Truma Bizman Hazeh doraisa. And the Gemara continues, V'savar Rabbi Yochanan, does Rabbi Yochanan really hold b'derabbanan lo ba'inan ribuya, that if you have a situation of a prohibition that's only a derabbanan, you do not need majority? The Gemara here is referring to what Rabbi Yochanan said on the previous Amud. Rabbi Yochanan said on the previous Amud, let's say you have a situation where you have a saw of Truma and a saw of Chulin, and it falls into a box of Chulin and a box of Truma. We don't know which one fell into which. So Rabbi Yochanan said, even if it's not a majority, meaning even if the Chulin in the box is not more than the saw of Truma, still we assume the Truma fell into Truma and the Chulin fell into Chulin. We can make that assumption. We don't have to rely on the fact that you have a majority. So the Gemara understands that means that Rabbi Yochanan says by derabbanans, because we assumed again that we're talking about a derabbanan over there, by derabbanans you don't need a majority. Rashi over here says, V'savar Rabbi Yochanan, Kasal Gadaitach Haida Mosif, the time of the Rabbi Yochanan, Lav Mishum Desamech Hashani Omer. The person asking the question now understands Rabbi Yochanan to mean that we're not really relying on the fact that the Truma went into the Truma and the Chulin went into the Chulin. That's not the real reason, even though that's what it said over there in the previous Amud, that we can assume that the Truma went into Truma and the Chulin went into the Chulin. That wasn't the real reason of Rabbi Yochanan. Elamishum, the real reason of Rabbi Yochanan was the Avinami Ipcha, that even if it was the other way around, even if the Truma went into the Chulin and vice versa, Lo Ichbeslan, we wouldn't care. The Lo Ba'inan Ribuya B'derabbanan, because we do not need majority when the prohibition is only a derabbanan level. Elamichi Arev Batalei, once it gets all mixed up, we say it's nullified. That's what the Gemara understands to be Rabbi Yochanan's position at this point in time. And so the Gemara says, is that really true? Vatanaba, we learned in a Mishnah, mikvah sheyesh bo arboim sa mechuvanos. Let's say you have a mikvah with exactly 40 saw, nasan saw, but then you add a saw of something that's not good, that's not rainwater, that's not kosher as mikvah water, v'natal saw, and then you take away a saw, so kosher, it's going to be kosher. In other words, the idea is the saw that you put in became batel and it becomes part of the mikvah, and so then the saw that you take out, it's going to be perfectly fine. And on that Mishnah, V'yomer Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, on that Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila said in the name of Rabbi Asi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, ad rubo, that's only true until a majority, meaning to say that you have to leave a majority of rainwater. If you keep putting in and taking out, but it gets to the situation where you're going to have taken out a majority of the rainwater, that would be problematic. And the Gemara says, my lav, is it not? What does Rabbi Yochanan mean over here? Doesn't he mean to say, that you need to have a majority of rainwater rainwater left. And the Gemara says, lo no, de lo nishkal ruba. It means that you can't take more than the majority of rainwater, but 50-50 would still be okay. Rashi over here explains, nasan saw v'natal saw kosher. Again, you put in a saw of something that's not rainwater, and then you take out a saw. Gabeshar mashkenu mepeiros v'temet shechmetz kai meseches mikvos. Other types of liquids that aren't good for a mikvah. V'yashmina da'avagav dechazer v'natal. And the chiddush is, even though you went and you took out a saw, v'ikol l'meimer hachaser le mikvah. Now you might be that you took out the rainwater. Sha'asa azos ein mashli masa, because the saw you put in wasn't rainwater, and maybe you took out the rainwater. Shein ruya l'mikvah. The stuff you put in wasn't fit for a mikvah. Afilu achi kosher. It's still okay. Because the moment you put in that other liquid, it's nullified, it becomes part of the mikvah. And it comes out, you have 41 saw right now that are all good for mikvah. When you take out one, you're left with 40 that are good. But to do the reverse would obviously not be good. Meaning, if you were going to take out a saw at first, so now you have 39, it's too small. Now if you're going to go put in something that's not good for, that's not rainwater, it's a mikvah that's still only 39, because the new stuff you put in is not good for mikvah. And so the Gemara assumed in this Mishnah, Mailav den shtaya ruba ad yotes so yachol asos kain avol tvei lo but den have a ruba megashamim. Gemara assumes that what Rabbi Yochanan meant is you always need to have a majority of rainwater, so you can only do this up till 19 saw, but you can't take out more than that. Al ma'avagav de psul she'iva derabanan. So you see, even though the psul of drawn water is only derabanan, boy ruba bekashros, you still need a majority. You can take out. You're only allowed to take out up to 19 saw, but no more. And the Gemara says, lo, and doesn't mean that. The lo nishkal ruba, what he really meant was that you haven't taken a majority. Avalad palga shapir dama, you're still good as long as you have 50%. You don't actually need a majority, because it's only midrabanan. That was the Gemara's first answer. And the Gemara gives another answer, which Rashi already alluded to. By same, if you want, I could say shani hacha. It's different over here. The ikolamemar shani omer, because in the case where you have the truma falling into the truma box and the chulin falling into the chulin box, you have that possibility of shani omer. You can make that assumption that the truma went into the truma and the chulin went into the chulin. And that really is the real reason for the leniency. It's not that we don't require rove. Rashi over here says, and really, by the Rabbanan issues, you do need a rove. And over here, Rabbi Yochanan says you don't need a majority. Because we rely on the shani omer. We assume the chulin fell into the chulin, and the truma into the truma of ein kan isra, and there is no prohibition. Now Rashi points out, over here you can't say shani omer, meaning to say by the mikvah, because by the water, it's all getting mixed up immediately. You can't say, I'm going to assume that whatever came out was not mikvah water, etc. You can't say that. You can't say that. You can only say that in the case of the truma and the chulin, and so therefore, again, when you have a shani omer, that's when you can rely on that. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, androgynous nose, it says that an androgynous is allowed to marry a woman. Now Rashi over here says, Tanan androgynous nose lechatchila. The Mishnah is saying that an androgynous is allowed to marry a woman lechatchila. Alma zachar malyo. You see that the Mishnah considers an androgynous to be a full-fledged male. The kashal Reish Lakish. Now the point of bringing this is it's difficult to Reish Lakish. Damar ein machil b'chaz of a show, because Reish Lakish said that when an androgynous marries a woman, let's say the androgynous is a Kohen, so he says the woman is only allowed to have truma because truma banazez d'Rabbanan, but she's not allowed to have chazav shok d'oraisa. But that doesn't make any sense, because we're saying in the Mishnah that an androgynous lichatchila can marry a woman. That means he's a full-fledged male, so she should be able to have the chazav shok as well. That's the difficulty on Reish Lakish. And so the Gemara answers, Tani im nasa. Don't have it be that the androgynous is allowed to marry a woman. It means if he's married to a woman, then that marriage is going to be b'di'evid okay. As Rashi says, Tani im nasa nasa. If he marries her, he marries her. Meaning deboyi gita mine, meaning she requires a get from him. Mishum safek zachar, because it's a doubt. He might be a male. Uliyalam sveiku, and really the Mishnah considers it to be a doubt. That's how Reish Lakish will understand the Mishnah. And that's why, again, if you have a Kohen androgynous marrying a woman, so she's not going to be allowed to have chazav shok, because he's not for sure considered a male. And so the Gemara says, one second, no say katani, but doesn't it say the word no say in the Mishnah, which implies lechatchila? But the Gemara says, one second, for the taimech, according to that reasoning, my avol lo nisa. It says in the Mishnah also that a man cannot marry the androgynous, meaning he can't be considered a female, and that certainly is talking about b'di'evid. As Rashi over here says, my avol lo nisa mashma di'evid. It means to say, even after the fact, let's say a man goes in and marries the androgynous, lo nisa, it is not a good marriage. So therefore you see that the end of the Mishnah is talking on a b'di'evid type of level. And so that's what the Gemara says, elamai nisa di'evid. What does the word nisa mean? It means b'di'evid, that's not going to be a marriage. So no se nami di'evid. So no se also means b'di'evid. If they marry, it's going to be a marriage, but it's still a situation of a suffix. It's just that it requires a get. And so the Gemara says, no, Amri, they said back, lo, no. No say lechatchila mashma. Really, no say means lechatchila. The androgynous is considered a man, and lechatchila can marry a woman. Avolo nisa di'evid nami lo. But in terms of not being married as a female, let's say a man tries to marry the androgynous, that even b'di'evid, it is not going to be good. And so the Gemara still argues that the Mishnah is mashma, that the androgynous is no say a woman lechatchila. And again, that's a question on Reish Lakish. It seems like, according to the Mishnah, the androgynous is certainly a male. But the Gemara continues, V'aminiktani seifa. But since it says in the seifa of the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says, androgynous chayovin olav skila kezocher. He says that by androgynous, let's say an androgynous has relations with a man, there's going to be a chi of skila, just like if there would be a man having relations with a man. And that, so Rabbi Eliezer, so therefore it implies that Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says that androgynous is considered a man. Mechlal de Tanakama sfuke mesafkale. So still doesn't that imply that the Tanakama considers an androgynous a doubt as to whether he is a man or not? And therefore, again, if it's going to be a doubt, that would be consistent with Reish Lakish, because she would not be able to have the chaz of a show, because he's not certainly considered a man. And the Gemara says, no, that's not what's going on in the Mishnah. Bein lamar mifshat pshitale. According to both the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer, it is certainly true that an androgynous is considered a male. So what's the machlokus between the Tanakam and Rabbi Eliezer? Ika beinayu skila mishnei makomos. The difference between them is there skila from both sides, talking about having relations from both sides, meaning the normal way of having relations, and then also the way of a man having relations with a man, which would be from the backside. As Rashi over here says, mishnei makomos afilo b'nikvuso, even from the feminine side, so to speak. That's the question between them. Demar savar chayavin olav skila mishnei makomos, because one of them holds that you're chayav skila from both sides. Umar savar kizocher, and one says no, he's considered full-fledged male, and therefore, as Rashi over here says, Rebbe Elazar savar kizocher b'mekom zachrus in b'mekom nikvus lo. In other words, according to Rebbe Elazar, it's a full-fledged male, and therefore, if a man has relations with an androgynous, it's only going to be considered skila if the relations are the normal way that a man would have relations with a man, meaning to say from the backside, otherwise not. Tanakama would say no, it's actually skila mishnei mekomos, because he can be considered both a male and a female. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav says, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Gimel Amud Aleph.